Alright, this next fly is going to be the Jujubee Midge. This is a Colorado midge pattern I came up with probably around 20 some years ago. I named it after my daughter, Julie. That Jujubee is her nickname. And this is a cool little midge pattern that I came up with on the South Platte up in Cheeseman Canyon to match the midges up there. It's a fairly simple fly. It's got a few little tricks working with the super hair. It's one of my very first commercial patterns available through Umpqua Feather Merchants. It's been commercially available for probably 15 years now. And it's tied on a Tiemco 2488. I'm going to tie a size 16 for you because it shows up better on the camera. But typical size range on this fly is 18 through 22. And I'm going to start off with, this is Tiemco 16-aught white thread. You can't get this thread anymore. They don't make it. So the closest thing you can find would probably be Viva's 14-aught. And what you're looking for is something that'll lay very flat and is as small as you can get it, so we maintain a smooth, slim body. So I'm going to start this thread about 2 eye lengths behind the hook eye. And I'm going to make a thread base, keeping that thread as flat and smooth as I can, down about halfway down the bend. And you can see I'm just sort of tucking those wraps one next to the other, and then I'll come forward again so that we've got that nice and smooth. Now this one that I'm going to tie today is going to be the chartreuse version, which is 2 strands of chartreuse super hair and 1 strand of black. So what I'm going to try to do is get these 3 strands even. You can see them here, and super hair always has got that little kink in it. So I'm going to take that and just give that a bit of a stretch, slide my fingers down it. That'll take some of that wave out, makes the material easier to work with. And then I'll cut the 3 ends so that they're all square. I'm going to take these 3 strands, and what I usually do to catch these is kind of hold them close to the end and angle them down on my near side of the hook. And then I can sneak my thread over them. And I'll usually get a couple of turns there, sort of in a little narrow band. Then I can draw these down to length, and what I'm doing is tying these down on my near side of the hook, and I just pull those butt ends down to where they're almost flush with the thread wrap. You got to be careful there. If you pull it out, you get to do it again. So now I'm going to start to wrap back over this, and I want to maintain my thread and keep it flat, so I may need to stop and spin it occasionally. If you tie right-handed, you'll probably need to stop and spin it a little more often. I'm going to come about halfway down the bend, and again you can see I'm keeping that thread as flat and smooth as I can. And then I'll just come straight forward again. Right back up to the front. So now I'm going to take my 3 strands. I usually cut these 3 strands so that they're all the same length. It just makes it a little easier to maintain a hold on all 3 of them at the same time. And we're going to start to build the body. Now the way these have lined up is chartreuse, black, going from bottom to top there. It really doesn't make any difference how they line up exactly. I used to really sweat it, but the only place it shows that they're any different is on the very first turn. From there they line up with chartreuse, black all the way up the rest of the hook. So I don't really worry about that too much anymore. But what I'm going to do to start this body is I'm going to come around the hook bend. I'm going to reach around the hook point here and then come back again. So this move where I come back again is important. Now as I come up here, this part's important too. What I want to do is I want to pull those 3 strands of super hair straight up, okay, straight vertical. And you can kind of rock them back and forth so that they sit next to each other. If you wrap perpendicular to the hook at this angle, as you approach the apex of the hook bend here, these 3 fibers will want to separate and you'll get spaces in the body. So what I've got to do is I've got to keep this first wrap darn near upright, and I'll kind of rock it back and forth to place that first turn in place. I'm going to come around the hook point, tuck those back in, and butt the next turn right in front of it. I'll try to keep my fingers a little more out of the way here. As I work forward, you can see as I come to the hook point, I've got to reach around the hook point and then come back again. If at any point you get any overlap, just sort of rock these fibers back and forth and they'll lay a little flatter. And then once I'm past the hook point, this is just like wrapping the wire on a brassy. You can see I'm slightly angling these back to let them rock flat down against the hook, creating this nicely ribbed body. And when I get to the front, I'll change hands, tie that off with 3 or 4 good tight turns. I'll follow it up with a few, and I'll come in and cut those 3 strands out. Now I'm going to come in and whip finish my white thread, and I'll trim that out. Then I'm going to start 8/0 black thread just in front of that tie off, and I'll overlap right up onto it as I attach that thread. Trim my tag out. And now for the wing case, I'm going to use a dozen strands of white floral fiber. And again, this is on a size 16, so this is a big one. You get down on a 20 or 22, you might only use 8 or 10. So I've cut the ends of those square. I'm going to catch them on top and draw them down to length. And by length, I just mean that those butt ends are behind, about an eye length behind the hook eye. Then I'll anchor them in place with a few turns. And then I can come forward over those butts. Now what I want to do here is sort of start to build the thorax. And the reason I've switched to 8/0 thread here is because it does build faster. I want the build for the thorax. I don't really want the extra bulk in the abdomen. 8/0 thread is sort of round in cross section, so it stacks up well when I'm trying to build a shape like this. You can see I've got sort of an egg shape, and I've got about a half an eye length or an eye length worth of relatively bare space there behind the hook eye, so we've got a clear area to tie off. Now I'm going to pull my floral fiber up over the top, and I'll drape my thread over it, and you can see I'll sort of exaggerate that there. My floral fiber is holding the thread up, and I'll pull straight down on the thread to center that wing case across the top of the fly, so it's right square over the top. I've got a couple turns on there, and then I'm going to take 6 of these strands of floral fiber on my near side and the other 6, and you can see I'll sort of roll these in my fingers, just sort of twist them up in my fingers, and that binds them into 2 individual strands. That's going to make the flies as I go on a little easier. I won't have to divide each bunch. They'll kind of stay separated on their own. So now the wing buds, these are tied like legs on a pheasant tail, but they're actually the wing buds of the midge. So this is a midge pupa. I'm going to pull this near bunch of floral fiber back along the side of the hook and just slightly under it. And I'm going to wrap back over it with a couple turns of thread. My thread torque will pull those floral fibers right in line with the side of the hook shank. Now on the far side, my thread torque is going to pull them down, so I want to hold them just up a bit and let the thread torque pull them down into place, so they're right along the sides of the hook. Just a few turns to sort of cover that up. Now one thing on this fly is I do make a prominent thread head because the head is part of the actual insect. It's not just part of the fly. So I'm going to make a little bit oversized head here. You know, midge does not end with its thorax. It's got a little head in front of that, so it's easy enough to do, and it matches up nicely. Now to trim these wing buds, I'll grab both bunches, set my scissors right against the back edge of the wing case, and square them up, and then trim those off. Kind of push them back down in line. And that is a chartreuse jujube. One of my most popular flies, certainly for years and years now. It's a great fish catcher. It's it's popular all over the country. Any place there's midges, which is everywhere. This is obviously the chartreuse and black version, red and white, black and white, olive and black, purple and blue, brown and white. Colors are endless. Color combinations are endless. Get you a few packs of super hair and kind of go to work. I've had one package of brown super hair for that entire time that I've been tying jujubes and jujubatus, that entire 20 years, and I've tied a lot of them, so the material lasts forever. You can get 6 or 7 size 20s out of 3 strands, so it lasts a long time. It's a pretty cheap fly to tie. Great way to fill your box and have a good cross section of a bunch of different midge pupa patterns in different colors and sizes. That is a Jujubee midge. I hope you love it as much as I do.